On this edition of Southern Newsweek, the first oysters of 2022 season have arrived at Bluff Harbour. The Otago University Students Association is distributing care packages to COVID isolating students. And a Dunedin musician and photographer is humbled by a special award. Kia ora, good evening, I'm Melissa Barton. The first boatloads of oysters arrived at Bluff Harbour this week, destined for cafes and homes around the country. The COVID-19 Omicron variant has meant delays in getting the tasty morsels out of Southland, but that hasn't stopped Dunedin outlets from getting fresh supplies.
Presenting these southern beauties. Best Cafe owner Jess Marks is happy to have oysters back on the menu in Dunedin, with the first oysters of the season going down well with diners last night and again today.
Huge. I have regulars that come back week after week and support me right through the year, which is amazing, and then I just have those that come in especially for oysters. As
these molluscs were being loaded onto Bluff Wharf, Jess Marks was waiting in the wings on her annual pilgrimage to collect and sample this year's crop. Marks picked up 30 dozen oysters on her quick trip to Bluff and reckons they could easily sell up to 150 dozen a day if supplies were available.
I actually really enjoy going down to Bluff. I feel like I'm one of the first to go down, and I actually eat some oysters down by the sea and just enjoy the moment. And then I bring them up and I just feel like I've been down, I've sort of seen what's been going on, and then hopefully have more oysters than I would be if I left it to the couriers.
Dawn Cassidy's been a regular customer at Best Cafe for many years, following in her father's footsteps. He first dined here in the 1950s.
Well, they're fat and juicy, yes, they rate, because they're from Bluff and straight out of the sea, really, so they do rate.
Boats will be out in Fobo Strait every day during this season through until the end of August. Diners at Best Cafe can expect to pay from $4.50 for a single oyster and $48 for a dozen, and you can have them either fresh or battered and fried. As for this year's taste, Marks ate a dozen while she was in Bluff this week and says the oysters are just as fat, juicy and delicious as always, and I can concur with either lemon or malt vinegar. A tasty treat for fans of the Southland oysters. In Dunedin, the South Today.
The University of Otago and the Otago University Students Association have joined forces to deliver care packages to students who are isolating due to COVID-19. The students are receiving essential supplies and a few treats if they've tested positive for COVID-19 or have been listed as close contacts.
Unloading essential supplies, ready to deliver them to students in need.
We're expanding out our existing welfare services that we provide to students, like our food bank service, so that we can provide care packages and essentials to any students who are positive for COVID-19 or having to isolate.
The OUSA is in charge of assembling care packages, receiving requests for them and delivering them to students. The packages include staples like rice, pasta, oats, fresh fruit and vegetables, as well as hygiene products. OUSA President Melissa Lama says the organisation has delivered many packages over the past few days.
I think today we're about just over 200 packages going out today to students. Yeah. Wow. Which is fantastic. I think it's a good sign that they're reaching out, which is what we want. And if anything, I don't want anyone to sit there silently on their own, and to let us know what support you need. That's why we're here. Yeah.
She acknowledges this might be a challenging time for students who are in isolation, away from whānau, and might not have the finances to support themselves. Otago University is providing funding to buy items for the packages, so far adding $50,000, with a further $50,000 available if or when it's required. The university's Trade Services Division is helping provide muscle to get the packages delivered.
We are supporting obviously AUSA with the delivery of food packages to vulnerable students that are isolating through the campus and North Dunedin.
Any student isolating because of COVID-19 can apply for support through the Student Support Hub at ousasupporthub.org.nz. In Dunedin, the South Today.
3 years after a white supremacist terror attack on Christchurch Mosque, one of the survivors is walking the same route the terrorists took from Dunedin to Christchurch. But his aim is to support peace and unity rather than hatred and division.
On 15th March 2019, the terrorists left Dunedin for Christchurch. to create terror and carry out violence and murder. 3 years later, Brother Timo, a survivor of the terrorist attacks, who was shot 9 times by the terrorists, is also travelling from Dunedin to Christchurch, taking the same route as the terrorists.
Christchurch mosque shooting survivor Timo Atakugugu is set to walk from Dunedin to Christchurch in 14 days, raising money for charities that support young children.
It is important for me they support Gumboot Friday, Save the Children and Child Cancer Foundations, because we need to look after our young generation. They need to be healthy, they need to be mentally healthy and fit too.
Gumboot Friday is run by the I Am Hope charity, helping children and young people with mental health challenges.
My role is to not only get out there, but also use young people to share their own stories about their mental health struggles, so that other young people know that they're not the only ones that struggle.
Among the supporters of the 2-week walk is Dunedin Multi-Ethnic Council President Dr. Lux Salvanesson, who says many of those shot had come to New Zealand in the hope of finding peace, not violence.
For this to happen to them at a place of worship, it just, shakes the core of what New Zealand stands for,
Timo Atakugugu was shot 9 times at the Al Noor Mosque and was convinced he was going to die at the time. He says his faith and determination will see him complete the journey.
I'm a stubborn Turkish man. My origin is from Turkey, so I will do this for our children.
Atakugugu is set to arrive in the Garden City on the 15th of March to commemorate the 3rd anniversary of the attacks. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Years of support for Dunedin Public Library's events, especially the annual music festival, have earned a local musician and photographer special recognition. Paul Allen is this year's recipient of the 2021 Dunedin Public Library's citation, recognising his many roles at the Nook and Cranny event.
The Dunedin Public Library's citation presentation is typically a lavish afternoon tea affair. The 2021 citation was to be presented in December, but a number of factors led to a few months' delay. Regardless of the lack of crowds, recipient Paul Allen was touched to receive the 2021 commendation.
I was so surprised and still feel very, very surprised and honoured for something that I'm passionate about. I love taking photos, supporting events in Dunedin City, and it has been a passion for many, many years, and it's just a way which I can give back to the city. So this is a surprise and a true honour.
The citation is awarded each year to a local resident who's made a long and outstanding contribution to the library's collections, services or programs. Director of Library Services Bernie Hawke says Paul Allen is a selfless supporter of library events, and the community has benefited significantly from his expertise.
Paul has made an amazing contribution to the Dunedin Public Libraries over a number of years. He's been a participant and a photographer of our highly successful Nook and Cranny Music Festival, and in addition to that, Paul has been a prodigious photographer, and he's taken photos of Dunedin street life, demonstrations, events over a number of years, and particularly of the South Dunedin area. And in 2020, Paul very generously donated his collection of over 4,000 curated photographs to be loaded onto our digital archive called Scattered Seeds.
Paul Allen was honoured for his role as the official photographer, performer and volunteer for the Nook and Cranny Music Festival since it began, as well as playing a significant part in its success and longevity. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come on Southern Newsweek, Clyde's Coast Guard is asking for help to get an upgrade for its no longer fit for purpose rescue boat. And the hunt is on for the Kokako in the southern bush. Welcome back. It's a big mission for a small team, but Coast Guard Clyde is up for the challenge. One of the country's most landlocked marine rescue services, the volunteer organisation is raising funds for a new custom-built rescue vessel.
Coastal-based Coast Guard teams throughout New Zealand are getting ex-America's Cup AC-36 RIBs funded by Lotto NZ. But sadly they're not fit for Clyde's landlocked Coast Guard service, which covers a range of activities.
Well, just before Christmas, the alarms went off, and they haven't stopped from being middle of November right the way through to just the other day. It's been a very busy season. The cycle trail has contributed to some of it. I'm sure COVID has something to do with people's mental health and all that sort of thing.
The Coast Guard's current boat was donated by the team in Sumner in 2006. Coast Guard Clyde President James Robinson says their work is as diverse as the patch they operate in. Crew member Barry Willis says the operation is staffed by professional volunteers and they're hopeful for a newer vessel.
Basically, our boat is the oldest one on the fleet at this point in time. It's done us very well, but it is getting dated, and it does have restrictions in terms of, our rescue capability. So from that point of view, we really need a new boat.
Wills says they need a jet boat which will carry enough people to carry a stretcher. The organisation is looking to raise between $300,000 and $500,000 for a new rescue vehicle, trailer and four-wheel drive vehicle. And as they don't qualify for an America's Cup cast-off, the members have set up a Give a Little page. In Central Otago, the South Today.
The hunt for the possibly extinct South Island Kokako has gone up a notch. A $10,000 reward has been offered to encourage people to report sightings of the very rare bird. We met up with one of the people checking out the public sightings.
We are filming professional wildlife surveyor Rhys Buckingham. He's checking up on a bird decoy and surveillance camera he's set up in the wild hills of Abel Tasman National Park in the hope of taking a photograph of a very rare, possibly extinct bird, the South Island Kokako, when a noise attracts his attention.
I heard very Kokako-like wing beats. Very loud, coming from that beech tree just over there.
One of the last believed sightings of the orange-wattled native crow was in 2007 near Reefton on the west coast. Buckingham has been putting up wanted posters on behalf of the South Island Kokako Trust in huts across the South Island, and someone has reported one here in the hills near Nelson.
I've been here 2 days this trip, and this is the fourth trip into this area since September, and I've heard absolutely nothing apart from that one wing flap today, which did arouse my interest. It's certainly not the proof, but luckily the wing flap was right where we set up a camera, where I've got a camera which will have about 6 months of batteries in it. It'll just tick along, waiting for a movement. We set up the dummy bird at that site, and the little temptation of the orange is still there, plus the artificial fruit. And if, in fact, the owner of that wingbeat was a Kokako, then maybe we'll have the concrete evidence.
Many have dismissed the South Island Kokako as long extinct, but Buckingham is sure there's still a few scattered survivors left after more than 100 years of habitat loss and predators.
There's very, very few South Island Kokako left. Just a remnant population, probably isolated in habitats such as there are found in Abel Tasman.
Thanks to the efforts from conservationists in the 1980s, a North Island species is surviving in some North Island forests where many of the native trees are laden with berries. Buckingham has worked with those conservation teams helping save the North Island bird, and he believes there's enough Kokako-friendly pockets of forest in the south as well.
I think the South Island bird lives more in the rich understory areas because it's not the same biomass, if you like, of fruiting in the South Island. And there's often more dominated beech forest, and a lot of the places around here are not very good Kokako habitat. But there are pockets in the damper area where it's completely different, really rich habitat where certainly one could expect Kokako.
However, he's been searching for the bird, following up on sightings for more than 40 years, without ever getting the concrete proof he's been hoping for.
Basically, what I'm doing now is trying to resolve anomalies which may or may not end up to prove the existence of South Island Kokako. But I think it will be, because anomalies just do not occur in the bush without a reason. And the definition of an anomaly is a call that sounds like Kokako, and that tuis and other songbirds get very excited with. And then I get excited by that call, so that keeps me going for another session until I've tried to resolve it. But this is a very, very difficult bird, and it seems to be a very quiet bird. It hardly calls. Only on a blue moon does it come out of the shadows, so as to speak, and makes a call, or you get a glimpse of it.
The South Island Kokako Trust has about 100 motion-activated cameras set up at key sites throughout the South Island. Near Nelson, the South Today.
The National Mountain Bike Championships were held recently in Christchurch. While Wellington riders Anton Cooper and Sammy Maxwell easily retained their national elite cross-country titles, the final focus was on the downhill titles.
The champagne flowed as the winners celebrated their success at the National Mountain Bike Downhill Championships. Compared to Saturday's wet and blustery conditions for the senior cross-country races at Horswell, the downhill races at Christchurch's Adventure Park on the Port Hills were held in dry and dusty conditions. Two Queenstown-based gravity riders stole the limelight to claim the elite downhill honours. For both George Brannigan and Jess Blewett, it was comeback wins. Blewett has returned recently from serious injury, while Brannigan has a long time between drinks for the former national downhill champion from 2015.
Long time between drinks, yeah. I think I didn't really do the maths, so I think it's been about 6 or 7 years, so just stoked to finally be back up top in New Zealand, yeah.
Run under COVID Phase 3 rules, the event was separated into two waves. Juniors and vets raced in the morning, while the elite races were held later in the afternoon. Christchurch schoolboy Luke Wayman won the under-17 national title and loved every minute of his winning 3-minute 2-second blast down the 1.7 kilometre circuit, which dropped 352 vertical metres.
Oh, I love that open section, they've just redone it, it's all smooth now. Probably those rock gardens are sick, just fast and straight, point and shoot.
In the end, it's all about the speed, and for many riders, simply making the finish line is the goal. In Christchurch, the South Today.
In 1978, a crop farmer near Balclutha bought his first combine harvester. Little did he know he'd still be occasionally using it about 50 years later.
Still going strong after almost 60 years. This now antique class combine harvester dates back to the 1960s and is proudly owned by Tom Whiteside of Waiwera South, halfway between Balclutha and Clinton.
Just a piece of nostalgia. I get it out every second year to chase the rats and bird's nests, get the bird's nests out, and and it's still in good working order considering it was built in 1964.
Whiteside owned this actual machine in the late 70s and early 80s for cropping wheat and barley. He eventually sold it to a Mossburn farm and then saw it again in a shed 3 years ago and was bitten by the nostalgia bug.
A few years ago I was going past on the road and saw my old header in the shed, and basically, long story short, I repurchased it. For the $1,200 I sold it, I repurchased it back for $1,200.
The old harvester has 60 horsepower, in contrast to modern machines which are equipped with 400 horsepower and can harvest close on 8 times as much in a day. Whiteside says there's also a huge difference with modern machines having air-conditioned cabs, compared to the poor operator being exposed to the elements on this old machine.
Well, the cabs are just like in a motor car or a modern truck, all air-conditioned, all climate control, never sitting in any dust. And nowadays, compared to have the mask on to keep the dust out of my lungs, eye protection to keep the dust out of my eyes, and the earmuffs to keep the noise down to a reasonable level.
While this old clunker cost little more than $1,000 3 years ago, new ones can easily fetch more than $600,000. In Balclutha, the South Today.
Coming up next on Southern Newsweek, a significant milestone achievement has gone up at Mosgiel, and a power box in Wanaka has a beautiful new painting on it. Welcome back. Ukrainians from across the south gathered in the lower part of Dunedin's Octagon last weekend as part of a New Zealand-wide campaign. About 100 people with ties to Ukraine or those wanting to show solidarity with Ukrainians took part in a vigil in the centre of the city.
Up to 100 people gathered in the Octagon to show solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Olga Vyasenko is one of the organisers of Saturday's gathering, and this was very personal for her, as her mother is currently in a bomb shelter in Kiev.
She is alone there, and I hope to get her from that place as soon as I can. So the one more thing, we want New Zealanders to help, and we ask New Zealand government to help us to bring here our relatives.
Tairi Member of Parliament Ingrid Leary stood in solidarity with those gathered and says there are ways the government can potentially help New Zealand Ukrainians to get their loved ones out of the war zone, which was once their home.
Those Ukrainians who have families in the Ukraine who don't have New Zealand visas, there isn't a mechanism through the United Nations that the New Zealand government uses. We're not the only country in this situation, obviously, so that is the process. It's not to say that there won't be other mechanisms available, but that is the official process that New Zealand will use to try and fast-track those people out.
These Dunedin residents are also concerned for family in Ukraine.
We've been in regular contact every day. Thankfully, the internet hasn't been cut out. I've heard that there's blackouts in some parts of Ukraine, but luckily for my family, that hasn't happened. So we're in regular contact, maybe multiple times a day, just checking in.
And we are deeply concerned, very concerned, because watching the news continually, and it's just devastating.
Southern-based Ukrainians and a handful of sympathetic Russians expressed their thanks for the people who came out in solidarity by singing an impromptu song. Similar events were held in other major New Zealand cities on the day. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Wanaka's passion for a rare bird has a plain green Aurora energy transformer turned into a colourful artwork. The artist behind the new creation says she was inspired by efforts of locals to help the nesting of crested grebes on the lake.
In acknowledgement of an iconic bird species, the new walkway along the edge of Lake Wanaka has acquired a new painting of native crested grebes, created by artist Chrissy Wicks on a transformer belonging to Aurora Energy.
It was an old green transformer box, and now it's painted with grebes on all four sides, so you can see it from the walkway, see it from the road, see it while you're biking or walking the beautiful path here.
4 years ago, Wicks painted a dinosaur slide at a local park. She says her new piece of art is inspired by the water birds that are successfully nesting on the floating platforms on the lake, thanks to the efforts by volunteer conservationists.
The theme was the grebes, because we really want to acknowledge the great project that a local took on himself and created a group around him, John Darby, and brought the grebes basically back to Wanaka.
Following a month of planning, the artwork took Wicks about a week to execute. In Wanaka, the South Today.
The building of the new pool complex at Mosgiel has reached a significant milestone. The first prefabricated concrete walls are up and the first 5-ton steel frames have gone up.
A support beam is swung into place before workers secure it to a wall. Cook Brothers Construction Mosgiel Pool site manager Scott Milne says it's a big day for the multi-million-dollar project.
Well, today we've been lifting steel in, the first big structural beam going right through, we're lifting in, so it'll probably take them all day to get it in.
The Mosgiel Pool Trust fundraised $4.2 million, with the Dunedin City Council budgeting more than $10 million on the pool as part of its 10-year plan through to 2028. The project manager says the shell of the old Mosgiel pool is still coming in handy.
The perfect opportunity was this. The only idea was how we're going to get all these big beams in and out. So yes, so we come up with a wee hoist to lift them out and rollers and that there, so we'll load them out and then they'll get stacked outside, and then we'll turn around and do another lot in there which will get stored up. And
global supply chains, along with many workplaces, have been majorly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. While he admits the project hasn't come away unscathed, he says they've gotten off pretty lightly so far.
Nothing at the moment. We've had a few wee scares with certain people. One young fella was at Castle Street, but no, he came back negative, and yeah, so we've had nothing yet, but ask me that in 2 to 3 weeks' time and it might be a different story.
The new facility is set to feature 4 water spaces, lap, learners, toddlers and hydrotherapy pools, as well as a spa pool, which will be fully accessible, while the car park is set to include e-vehicle and e-bike charging stations. The project has a completion date of mid-2023. In Dunedin, the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news and videos from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz. And you can follow Channel 39 on YouTube to catch our news bulletins on demand. Nō reira, kia pai te pou, ka kite anō.
Public interest journalism funded through New Zealand On Air.